Howdy, and welcome to another episode of Appalachian Gaming Professors. I'm one part of your two-part duo, Justin, and this is my co-host, my comrade, my compatriot, my colleague, Jeff. Say howdy, Jeff.
Ho!
On today's episode, a gaming one, we'll be discussing Telltale's games, The Walking Dead Season 1, as part of our 3-week segment on relationships and post-apocalyptic. And as always, our podcast is out to
discuss, analyze, and criticize games in conjunction with literature and film.
But first, we're going to give our listeners a little bit of an update on the podcast and talk about something that's been on our mind. So the website's been doing pretty good. I got it up.
Remind our listeners what the website URL is.
Gamingprofessors.com. Super simple. Easy to find. I think we're actually in Google Cache now. If you Google us, we'll come
Good.
up. And a bunch of colleges, I guess, because professors in there. In Appalachia.
Should get us on the MLA list. Yeah.
So anyways, the website is up. People can go there and they can listen to the podcast. They can subscribe there. They can get to our YouTube channel from there. And if you want, you can comment on each episode, leave your feedback there. And the website's a good resource. That's where we post all our bonus content, like the interview with Cormac McCarthy's there with Oprah. There's a little bit of a joke that Jeffrey put on there, a YouTube video. So you might want to check that out. It's a good resource. So check it out. You can even link it to your friends. They can check out the podcast from there. And the other thing I want to go over is we've had 100 downloads last week.
And that's across several
all
platforms.
That's total.
Also, we're up on iTunes now.
That's pretty good for a podcast just starting out.
I agree.
Second week. I don't have the stats from the first week because we didn't get on the media host until this past week. I only have last week's over 100. I think it was like 107. So pretty good. Now, there's something that me and Jeffrey kind of want to discuss with everybody. So, like in literature, Jeffrey, there's high literature and then there's
low literature.
Right. And, low literature would be like...
comic books have been seen as low literature, like pulp novels.
I think that some
like,
comic books, yes.
Like a $3 paperback.
Yeah, there we go. So like a romance novel, it's all about some woman doing it with a stranger out in the middle of the...
mysterious cowboy with a 9-inch long.
And then they have like, on the cover, they have like the ripped cowboy and the tacky cowboy hat and everything. Yeah, okay. So one of those. You get the point.
Some of the suggestions we've been getting, have involved individual titles for us to cover. Definitely appreciate some of that feedback. We implore some of our listeners, if you have some suggestions, you have some texts or some games that you would like for us to cover, maybe mention it as a theme. So, like for instance, one of our close friends, suggested us to do Final Fantasy VII.
Which Final Fantasy VII's an okay recommendation,
right? But
there's a narrative there.
But let's say that if we were going to cover Final Fantasy VII, we would need to do it, with a broader theme. So, like for instance, if we were covering environmental activism, that might be a theme for Final Fantasy. That's what Final Fantasy VII might fit into.
Or if we were doing overrated narratives.
Yeah.
But, so Final Fantasy VII, I mean, it's a decent recommendation, but it wouldn't fit in a theme very well.
Not to pick on that suggestion. You see our point.
Like, we wanted to do Mario. We can't really do Mario because Mario doesn't exactly fit as a high art type game. It doesn't have that much of a narrative to it. It's got solid gameplay. It's a fun game. It's a good game, but it doesn't have a narrative that's very deep.
Bowser mentions at the beginning of Super Mario Galaxy 2 that he's much bigger than Mario in many ways, but that's about it as far as the narrative
what's the
goes.
Implications of that, I wonder. He has that obsession with Peach that we could analyze.
Yeah. Peach is a commodity.
We can make a really feminist argument about Super Mario World. Okay.
Right.
Before we get too far off that tangent,
we could talk about the ecosystem in Super Mario Galaxy, or not Super Mario Galaxy, Super Mario Sunshine.
See, it would have to be these stretches. It doesn't fit easy. But I think you guys get the point. So if you have a suggestion, think of suggested themes, and then we'll try to find media, games, movies, literature that fits, and we'll take it from there.
Stay tuned till the end of our episode 2 to see what our next theme is.
Yeah, we'll be going over that at the end. I think that's pretty much all that we wanted to cover. Should we go ahead and move on to the next segment, Jeffrey?
Yeah, and our next segment is Weekly Nerd Talk. I've been up to several things this week. I finished Marvel's Iron Fist. Iron Fist got picked on a lot, by the reviewers. I read through some of the reviews once I finished watching it. It's mostly because the Iron Fist and the source material was an actual Asian man and not the whitest white boy you could pick out. There's a little bit of that kind of thing going on.
Didn't they do that with like Ghost in the Shell?
Yeah, Ghost in the Shell had, I think it was Scarlett Johansson, right?
Yeah, I think that's who it was.
Yeah, I saw that movie earlier this year. It was a decent movie. I think it fit too much into 1 hour and 20 minute sort of narrative. I felt like it would have been much better if it was like an HBO miniseries or something.
Which I haven't seen the movie, but I'm pretty familiar with the anime series, especially the offshoot of Standalone Complex. It's extremely deep. There's a lot of philosophical elements in it. It pulls a lot of material from like Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep?
Right.
It's all about like, do you really have free will? There's like so many themes that this anime tackles, and I just can't imagine them putting it all into one movie. However, Jeffrey, you may not know this. The original Ghost in the Shell was a movie. In Japan, it was an anime movie. That's where a lot of the inspiration for like the anime series and stuff pulls from. It's not like direct canon, but that's what inspired a lot of stuff.
I did not know that.
Mm-hmm. So you may want to watch that movie sometime.
So yeah, I finished watching Iron Fist. Yeah, it had lots of good things going for it. The main character, Danny Rand, wasn't as bad as some people were making him out to be. It had a really not interesting antagonist, played by the dude who was the narrator in 300. I think that was mostly the reason why I like the show. That guy just kicks a lot of ass.
Just being completely honest.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was a fun watch, but I finished that and moved on to the Defenders, the Marvel TV version of the Avengers, at least. It features Daredevil.
I still can't get over the fact that rhymes, but go on.
Yeah, Daredevil, Jessica Jones, Luke Cage, and Iron Fist all team up to fight a criminal organization known as the Hand, which is a bunch of ninjas and stuff. Yeah,
very Asian.
Yeah, they're trying to destroy the city of New York. Yeah, like in Batman Begins.
Kind of Elder Scrollsy a little bit there.
Yeah, yeah, it's not the most original thing, but it's interesting watching all these characters team up and interact with one another. Fun little banner. They make a joke out of poor Iron Fist. That kind of hurts my soul a little bit. Now, I've also purchased Uncharted: The Lost Legacy this week.
Been having fun with that one?
Yeah, so far so good.
Good old Naughty Dog.
Good old Naughty Dog. This is their first run with a completely female protagonist, Chloe Frazer, who was in Uncharted 2 and for a good bit of that, and Uncharted 3, she was in that for a couple of chapters. She was not in Uncharted 4 at all. This is pretty much a DLC of Uncharted 4. So far so good. It's more Uncharted 4, for those of you who have played that. Just a fun pulp adventure. I'm a couple of hours into it. As far as some other content I'm looking forward to, my XCOM 2 expansion pack got delayed until September the 14th.
Oh, man.
Yeah,
I'm going to play those before that comes out.
Yeah, that makes my soul hurt a little.
Yeah. Because you've been telling me to play them forever.
But Yakuza Kiwami is coming out next week. I think that'll be a series you would even love because it's so in tune with Japanese culture, and
I might like it then.
It's kind of like Metal Gear in the sense that got a serious narrative, but also it doesn't take itself seriously at the same time. It's very self-aware. Yeah, but Yakuza Kiwami, which comes out next...
That sounds a little bit like Grand Theft Auto, so I probably would like it.
It's pretty much compared to Grand Theft Auto in Japan. It's even got very similar sort of gameplay.
Yeah, I'll check it out.
Yeah, it's very popular in Japan, but it's still catching on in America.
I wonder if I can get it on Steam,
Sony's publishing it, so...
Probably not.
Yeah, I don't
Probably exclusive.
Yeah, but Yakuza Kiwami is a remake of the first Yakuza game from the PlayStation 2. Not a remaster, a complete remake. So it should be a good time. It's retailing for $30 to start out, which you can get it on Amazon for a 20% discount. You get it for about $20.
If you got Prime?
If you got Prime, right?
Yeah.
Or Best Buy, Gamer Club. So yeah. Now I've also, been teaching and engaging with literature over the past week. I read Homer's Iliad for the second time. Probably been 10 years since I read it last. And it was a really compelling epic. I enjoyed teaching it a lot. My students seemed to warm up to it after a while. This week coming, I'm going to be teaching the Aeneid, which is the Roman epic, right around the time Augustus Caesar took power. And
oh man, that sounds like it's up my alley.
yeah, right when Augustus took over, he pretty much said, let's make Roman culture. We've relied on the Greeks for too long.
You know, Jeffrey, that I just love the Julians.
Right.
Especially Augustus.
But Augustus commissioned Virgil to write a great Roman epic.
That sounds like good old Augustus. He was a major patron of the arts. A little bit of history for you guys. He had the longest period of peace in the empire?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, he commissioned Virgil to write the Aeneid. Long story short, in the Iliad, there's a character named Aeneas who's a Trojan. And pretty much the Aeneid picks up right at the end of the Trojan War when the Greeks are conquering the Trojans. Aeneas pretty much just takes off with a band of warriors, a band of people. He eventually goes off to found Rome, according to the mythology there.
We all know it was Romulus and Remus.
Yeah, well...
That's just hearsay.
This is the Empire's version of things. Yeah, he gets into lots of adventures along the way. He seduces the Queen of Carthage named Dido. He leaves her. Yeah, she kills herself when he leaves her.
Sounds tragic.
Right. Yeah, I'm going to be teaching that on Tuesday, and on Thursday I'm going to start teaching Dante's Inferno, which Virgil, who is the poet, Dante meets Virgil in hell. Virgil gives Dante a tour through hell. Illuminating, to read both of those two texts together in the same.
Yeah, that would be an interesting study, wouldn't it?
Right. My students will read Virgil on Tuesday, and then they'll get a guide through hell with Virgil on Thursday.
How quaint.
What have you done this week?
Well, I actually had a week after I got done editing last episode. I could do what I wanted. And I spent over 5 hours trying to learn a little bit of CSS, which is a programming language, so I could program one tiny little line on the website. But you know what? I did it, damn it.
You spent a long time programming that button to say episode summary.
Yeah, that's just because WordPress and its themes are a little not friendly to the newcomer if you want to customize a lot. But I learned it, damn it, by sheer persistence.
Sheer force of will.
And after I finished with all of that, I got to play a little bit of PUBG with my buddies from Oregon.
Have you got the chicken dinner yet?
No, I am god awful at that game where I have no practice. I don't know what's good. I don't know what's bad. I can't parachute worth crap.
Need to get our boy Kevin to teach you the ropes.
Absolutely terrible. If I play it more and I spend a lot of time on it, I will probably get better. I'll probably never be really good, but I'll be okay. Then after I played some PUBG, I got to play in Darkest Dungeon. And I got to tell you, there are certain types of games that just hit my dopamine center and pump it. And then I want to play those games for like hours on end and not sleep until 6 a.m. in the morning. And that's one of them.
My brother recommended that to you, right?
He did. He apparently knows my taste very well. I'm all about strategy and simulation, but I like it done well. And Darkest Dungeon does it really well, and it's hard, super punishing.
Tell our listeners about Darkest Dungeon, the basic premise. Talk about it being Lovecraftian.
Alrighty, so it's thematically pulls from H.P. Lovecraft's mythos, the Cthulhu mythos. There is a derelict town. Your ancestor has somehow magically called you to this town, and he wants you to restore it. It is implied, which I haven't got that far in the story, that he basically summoned some type of dark force, which is implied to be Cthulhu.
They dig into the deep, right?
Yeah, kind of. You go through like catacombs and stuff like that. Which this might all sound like it's this amazing graphic adventure, but it's not. It's a really simple interface. It's basically a very simple dungeon crawler with very punishing combat dynamics. The narrative is pretty superficial on the surface, but I mean, it does have a narrative.
The characters go insane in a Lovecraftian fashion
so
if they see dangers.
So in RPGs, you have resource systems, all right? Like you have mana bars, you have energy, combo points, that sort of stuff. You know what I'm talking about?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So in this game, there's really no resource system like that. It's more about managing debuffs and learning the proper strategy, and not taking too much of what is called the stress system in a dungeon. And certain enemies will give you more stress. And if you get too much stress, you go insane. If you go insane, there's probably like an 80% chance you're going to get this negative debuff, and everything's just going to go bad. It's not going to help you whatsoever. Once one person goes insane, they all start slowly going insane.
Right.
Now, there is a chance, though, that after you get your breaking point, that you'll become like a stronger character. The character will become stronger. He'll get some sort of benefit. That does not happen often. But when it does, it's a good thing. The game is extremely RNG. It's all random number generation. Especially in the beginning until you start to get like a solid party, you're probably just going to get a game over. But if you get off to a good start, then it's a pretty romping good time sometime.
Yeah, how are you playing it with the Crimson Court DLC?
I'm going to play that after I finish the base game.
After the base game. Yeah, I haven't played it too much yet, but I've seen it. I've seen my brother play it. It's got a very beautiful art style.
Yeah, the art style is quite good.
And the narrator of the game is really a kick-ass guy, too. My brother actually showed me he's done narrations of H.P. Lovecraft's short stories, and that's where they actually got the guy from.
That's neat. I didn't know that.
Yeah, so you can look it up on YouTube.
Sometimes before you go on, he delivers a line that just makes me giggle when you take it out of context. In the like water-based area, the cove, you go underground and you fight off like they're basically murlocs, sort of like merman type abominations. Once you enter, sometimes he'll say, "The smell of rotting fish is almost unbearable." Take that one out of context and giggle like a 12-year-old. His line delivery is really good. But after you play for 20 hours, you start to hear him over and over. But
right.
I mean, for what it is, it's pretty good.
I'm pretty sure this game's available on lots of platforms. It's on PC.
Yeah, it's been ported to a lot.
PS4 and Vita. It's even on Vita.
I'm playing the PC version. And I just couldn't imagine playing it on anything else because you can click to right where you want to go to. Really fun game. I recommend it to everybody that likes like a hard turn-based type style.
How long did you play that game this week?
Within 3 days, I played it for over 26 hours.
Woo.
So
having fun.
Yeah. Yeah. Having fun with it.
Lovecraft is an interesting guy.
Yeah.
To say the least.
Yeah. I can't wait to spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert. Why not while we're on the subject?
I can't wait to discuss him. He is going to come up later, and you can probably guess which month, but we're not going to confirm.
Yeah, so shall we move on to our weekly theme then?
Yeah, I think that we have ran it on with tangents long enough.
Yeah, so this week then we're talking about Telltale's games, The Walking Dead Season 1. Now to kick off this segment, I'm going to turn it over to Justin because he's going to tell us a little bit about Telltale's long history of games, some of the games they've made. We can even sort of pause during that and talk about some of these games that we have played. I've played some. You've played some, right?
Okay, so I've been basically a Telltale fan since the beginning, and the reason why is because Telltale was an off-branch of some LucasArts employees who worked on Sam & Max Freelance Police. It was canceled. It was a sequel to the 1993 game Sam & Max Hit the Road, one of the best point-and-clicks that you can play. It's old, but you can get it on Good Old Games, GOG.com. I think it's about $10.
You can get it on Steam?
Nope, can't get it on Steam because it uses what's called the Scum engine, and you got to use the software for it. Sam & Max franchise, great franchise. We'll talk more about that in a bit. So anyways, these guys basically got disheartened because they canceled the project. They went off and started their own company, which became Telltale Games. Spelling of Telltale is Telltale Games. Just so you know, it's a reference to Edgar Allan Poe, The Telltale Heart. So they were known for their point and clicks, especially early on. They did point and clicks in the style of Monkey Island, Grim Fandango, Maniac Mansion, for examples. And then they started making like games for bigger companies. Like they made these licensing agreements where they would make games for these other companies. It all started with CSI, 3 Dimensions of Murder.
What are those 3 dimensions?
I have no clue. And needless to say, you have probably not heard of that game. And it was a flop. It didn't do very well in ratings. I think Metacritic gave it like a 63 for the PC version and a 50-something for the PlayStation version. It's on the PS2. Not a very good game.
Some shovelware.
Yeah. But anyways, the founders, their names were Dan Connors, Kevin Bruner, and Troy Molander. Another interesting fact about Telltale is that they were primarily funded through what's called angel investing. Do you know what that is?
I do not.
Okay, that's like when a wealthy person sees a project and they independently invest in it based on the view and the drive of the project.
We need somebody like that.
Yeah, they don't have like they don't really worry about the financial side of it. They have the money available, and if they believe in it, they'll give you money and you can start off. Very risky, but highly rewarding if it comes off.
Right.
Because you get a big share. The first game that they did was Telltale Texas Hold'em. Do you know about that one?
I do not. No.
Okay, so this was like a really cheap kind of party game, and it had these 4 generic characters. There's like a surfer boy, and like, well, he's a skateboarding boy, and an old lady, and like this weird guy.
And if it's a Texas Hold'em game, it definitely needs a femme fatale.
Well, old lady, if that's your thing, I guess.
Yeah.
So basically, they sat around a table and you played Texas Hold'em with them. That's what the game was. It was a standalone title. They didn't continue on it until later. They made a little bit of an Easter egg game that had Telltale characters in it. But that's basically what it was. And then they did their first original project, which was called Bone, Out from Boneville. The Bone series was planned to be a episodic series like they're known for, but it only got to episode 2 and they discontinued it. It just wasn't popular enough to maintain. So the first 4 games out of the door was Texas Hold'em, Bone Out from Boneville. Then they did that CSI game because they needed the money with the licensing deals. And then they did Bone, the Great Cow Race. None of these games did that great. Rough start.
Sounds rough.
Then they did their biggest hit, the one that basically got them on the map, and that was Sam and Max Save the World. That was season 1. Most people know it as Sam and Max season 1.
Talk to us a little bit about that game.
Okay, so a little bit of background information here. I absolutely love point and clicks, but Sam and Max is my favorite franchise, and I have like framed posters of them around my room.
He's not lying.
I really love this franchise. Well, Sam and Max is about a anthropomorphic dog and a rabbit who are basically private investigators. They're like freelance police is what they call themselves within this quirky universe. And they go off, solve crime. It's based on a comic book by Mr. Steve Purcell. And his comic book's actually pretty good. A few years ago, they sold a hardback archive of it. It was moderately priced when you get it. Now it's hard to find and it's expensive, and I wish I had a copy. That's just like Sam & Max is so renowned by fans that there's this statuette, and it runs for about $750 on eBay.
Oof.
Yeah, it's very hard to find. And when it came out, it was only $70.
So Sam & Max is mostly on PC, but didn't they port it to some of the consoles?
Yeah, they ported it to almost every console that was out at the time. You can usually find a copy in a bargain bin somewhere for a Wii or...
It's pretty much like a nice, almost a comedy game of sorts, isn't it?
It's a really fun game.
I purchased it on Steam, and some of the titles of the episodes are interesting.
Yeah, like in the
Save
first
Abe
season.
Lincoln.
Yeah, like Abe Lincoln is there, and Sam and Max go to the White House, and Max is elected president somehow, and I highly recommend it to people. However, you do have a learning curve because it is in essence an old-style point-and-click. It has a little bit of difficulty curve. You have to understand the logic puzzles, but after you start getting them down...
It's a Telltale game with actual gameplay.
Yes. A lot of thinking. You just can't go into it and expect to go through it. You got to think about the puzzles and stuff, unless you want to cheat and look up the solutions, but that's no fun. And then they did, after Sam & Max Saved the World, they did another CSI game because they did 5 of those CSI games to continue their episodic format. They did the second season of Sam & Max, which is called Sam & Max Beyond Time and Space. And this game was very polished, a very good game. Sam and Max go on a lot of wacky adventures in that. They go like to Santa's workshop. They go to the Easter Islands. They meet a vampire, have an episode with him. Lots of stuff. Okay, after they did that one, they did Strong Bad's Cool Game for Attractive People.
Okay.
Do you know who Strong Bad is?
I did not.
I'm sure some of our listeners do. Strong Bad is a popular Flash cartoon series. It was around in the early 2000s. That's when it was in its heyday. Basically, Strong Bad is a luchador. He torments a guy called Homestar Runner. That's like who he sees as his arch nemesis, but Homestar Runner is just so laid back, he doesn't care. It's a really funny little series. They did a point and click for it. Then after that, they started getting a little bit more focused on other franchises because Strong Bad got a decent amount of money from it. It wasn't a critical success, but it was a success. It showed that the format was valid for them. They went on to Wallace and Gromit's Grand Adventures. Wallace and Gromit, as in the British TV show. That game did okay. Biggest game in the world, but if you have a franchise, apparently, you can just sell because fans of it will buy it. Then they did what I was so happy to hear about, Tales of Monkey Island, which I love Monkey Island. The LucasArts games especially. Their series wasn't the best, but it was an extension on the story. So I have a Monkey Island poster on my wall too that's very
I haven't played any of these games.
You really got to have a taste for the point and click type style of games to really get into most of these. And then after the Monkey Island, they did another CSI game.
Jeez.
Who done it? Was a standalone. It was CSI Deadly Intent. They were really banking on the CSI, buddy.
Right. Can you blame them, though?
I don't know. I guess somebody was buying them because they kept doing them.
PS3 got no CSI love.
No, not yet. Later they do. I'm looking down my list. After they did the next CSI game, they did the third season of Sam & Max. They kind of ended it on a way that might have implied that was the end. It really upset me. It's open to kind of continuing, but they haven't really continued it because people are more familiar with the other franchises they're printing. After Sam & Max, they did an independent project. It was called Puzzle Agent. It's actually called Nelson Tether's Puzzle Agent. And it's a little bit of a puzzle game. It's set in like Fargo. It's like Midwestern, snowy. There's been this mystery. He's an FBI agent. He goes around solving puzzles because he works for the Bureau of Puzzles.
Sounds like Twin Peaks.
Well, it's kind of got like maybe a little bit of a Twin Peaks feel to it. It's a weird game. It's fun, but if you don't really like puzzle games, you probably won't like it. And then they did another CSI game.
Who done it?
And after that, they did Poker Night at the Inventory, which was going back to Telltale. It's a reference to the Telltale Texas Hold'em game.
I gotta play this.
It has the Heavy from Team Fortress 2. It has Strong Bad. I think it has Max.
I think we need a new one with Lee and Batman. You know,
get the word out. You might get it.
Yeah.
So after they did that, they did Back to the Future.
I've played some Back to the Future.
This was the turning point, and this is basically the game that cemented their new style of game. It wasn't a good game.
No, I've only made it through the first 2 episodes.
It was a terrible game.
What didn't you like about it?
I haven't played it. This is just stuff I've heard from people.
Yeah, like I got through the first 2 episodes of it last year during Back to the Future craze.
I bet I've never heard anybody say anything good about it.
Just a lot of like annoying obstacles that you would run into trying to get through the narrative. The narrative seemed to be a pretty fun Back to the Future vibe. You had to go through so many, like you had to talk to Bob before you could talk to Jimmy sort of obstacles. That, it kind of got annoying to me in that way.
Superficial dialogue checks is what that is.
Right.
It just lengthens the game. After they did the Back to the Future, they did Jurassic Park, the game. It's in the same boat. Most people don't even know it exists. I remember this in person because I used to frequent their website because I loved Sam & Max. And I knew when they started doing Jurassic Park games, they'd never touch Sam & Max again because, I mean, they just make more money off something else. Then they did a Law & Order game, so they went from CSI to Law & Order.
Oh, man.
Law & Order Legacies. Dun, 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 you know.
It sounds like they're appealing to a certain demographic here.
I don't know.
Are they appealing to like the 45-year-old soccer moms who like to play Wii?
I guess. Yeah. I think they pretty much were doing it because the companies were seeking them out to do games for them. After that game, they did what we're discussing today, and this was a major turning point for the company, The Walking Dead Season 1.
Right.
It was simply titled as The Walking Dead, which I'm not going to discuss that one because we're going to later. So after they did that, the first season, they did Poker Night 2, another poker game. Then they did, and you can talk about this one a little bit, The Wolf Among Us.
Right. I love The Wolf Among Us. You know, it's, a DC comic story from Vertigo. It's pretty much all the different Fable characters, and they all live in this pretty much is this slum. It very much takes from film noir. Yeah, but it's very, all these characters are living in desolate conditions, very slummy conditions, and basically these murders start happening, and the big bad wolf is the chief detective, and you play his name is Big B Wolf. Wonderful game.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it too. I played on his recommendation. And after The Wolf Among Us, we have The Walking Dead Season 2. Honestly, the weakest season, in my opinion.
Yeah, I would concur.
It seemed like the problem with Season 2 was it was more fan service than actual narrative. And what I mean by fan service is it was more like on the superficiality side. It wasn't about Clem's experience, more as giving the fans something to just continue the story. Sometimes you got to end the story when you need to end the story.
Right. Now, we talked about The Last of Us. I'm a little concerned that The Last of Us 2 might happen.
Okay, so after Season 2, they did Tales from the Borderlands, which I'm not going to cover much on that because I'm not.
So from what I've gathered about that one, it's on my to play list. But from what I've gathered about that one, that's one of their most revered games.
I might have to check it out.
Yeah, it takes the Borderlands formula. It's supposed to be like light humor, adds a lot of characters to this sort of mythos. It's definitely on my to-do list. It was a commercial flop for them, I've heard on some podcasts. I've heard that on some podcasts over the past week or so. Telltale saw it as a commercial failure, so it's unlikely we'll get another one.
So after Tales of Borderlands, they did Game of Thrones game. I don't think I need to explain that one.
And that one, most fans of Game of Thrones, I'm not a Game of Thrones fan, but most fans I've heard were very disappointed with that one.
That's what I heard too.
Right.
And then they did Minecraft Story Mode. I've heard that it's a pretty decent narrative.
You're a big Minecraft man. You haven't played that?
I'm not a traditional Minecraft player.
Right.
And Minecraft itself is just a sandbox game. And then after that game, they did The Walking Dead Michonne, which is an off-branch of the TV show, the character Michonne.
It's the only one I haven't played because I don't watch the TV show.
I have it in my Steam library, just haven't got around to it. And then they did the Batman
game. The Batman game.
Batman, the Telltale series. Tell us a little bit about that since you love it so much.
Oh, man, it's so good. It pretty much puts you in the shoes of Bruce Wayne. It tells this really unique Batman story. I don't want to spoil the plot too much, but it takes some directions, that you normally don't go in, in a Batman story. Most of the choices in the game are you can choose to use Bruce Wayne's influence as a rich billionaire playboy type, to try to influence the game one way, or you can choose to be Batman and do.
So they kind of did like the choice system. Now,
right.
Did they do the illusion of choice that they're so known for? Does it end up happening the same no matter what you pick?
Sometimes it does, but sometimes it doesn't too. That game to me felt like one of the games where there were some stakes at risk.
That's good. I am going to play that eventually.
Yeah, and lots of interesting characters. Troy Baker, who we know from The Last of Us, played Bruce Wayne. He did a really excellent job with the voice acting. Laura Bailey was Catwoman.
And then after the Batman game, they did The Walking Dead: A New Frontier, which is the newest season.
Well, we both played that.
I think both of our combined feeling about that game is it was better in Season 2, but it's not nearly as good as Season 1.
Right.
Okay, and the last game that they released in April was Guardian of the Galaxy, the Telltale series.
Yeah, and Guardians, I've heard, most of the reviews I've heard on that is, it's a poor imitation of the actual Guardians films.
It seems like Telltale is known for riding the bandwagon of what's popular at the time, especially now. And you can't blame them. They do publish good games, and that's how people seek them out. You go where the money is no matter what business you're in. Very few companies have the luxury of producing their art the way they do or want to and make money off of it. You have to go where the market takes you. So you can't really criticize Telltale too much for kind of being
more commercial.
Yeah,
we could.
Being commercial.
We talked at the beginning of the episode about high art and low art. That's something that often gets associated with low art as well, just when it's based off of sheer commerciality.
But look at them. They produced a few good games that are considered high.
Walking Dead, for instance. Right.
And a little bit of future releases, which we're not going to talk about these at all.
Batman.
Yeah, they're doing a Batman. They're doing another Minecraft game. They're doing the last season. It's supposed to be the final season of the Walking Dead game.
Another Wolf Among Us.
They're doing another Wolf Among Us and a Game of Thrones. So I guess Game of Thrones was moderately successful, but they're doing a second one.
Let me, just in case, I'm shooting into the wind here. But Telltale, if any of you ever listen to this podcast, please make a Superman game. Please.
Jeff really wants a Superman game.
There's never been a good Superman game.
You mean you didn't like Superman 64?
Oh,
it's such a good game.
Superman's sheer amount of powers sort of limits him into a traditional gameplay sense. But he would be perfect for this choice simulator sort of game.
Especially since he deals with a lot of morality questions.
Right. It would be so brilliant. Please, please do it. Please.
But a little bit of explaining my sarcastic joke back there. Superman 64 is one of the worst games known to man.
Right.
So
there's lots of videos on YouTube about it.
Go look them up if you're interested. I think that pretty much covers Telltale as a company, what they make, who they are, and, So I think it's time we move on to the next part.
So let's talk about The Walking Dead then. Again, we're not going to spend too much time on summary.
I'll give the brief summary here.
It's The Walking Dead, right?
Yeah. You start off as Lee. Lee is in a cop car. He's in the back of a cop car. He's under arrest. He's going to prison. A zombie comes out in the middle of the road. The deputy hits it. They go off the side of a
hill somewhere.
They go over the hill. It knocks Lee out. Lee has to struggle. He gets out of a cop car. He has to end up shooting. Was the deputy shot?
Yeah, the deputy turns.
Deputy turns. He shoots him. Then he goes up the hill and he goes into this house. And there's a little girl up in the tree house that he finds. And that's Clem. And then they go off to a farm. He meets some people at the farm. You're faced with some morality choices. Then you go to the group. Eventually,
he meets a lovely, lovely redneck named Kenny, who I adore.
So we're going to cover more on Kenny in a bit.
I adore you, Kenny.
Let's not get too off track here. So they go from the farm with his redneck and the family he has with the redneck, and they take a little boy with them with Clem. Clem has somebody to talk to. They go to a hotel, and then they have some events at the hotel. They settle down. They're on the verge of starvation because they can't get resources. They make contact with some farmers. Farmers turn out to be cannibals. There's a whole episode about it.
All right.
It's one of the better episodes in the...
Yeah, I plan to talk about that a lot.
So after they deal with the farmers, they go to...
Well, they pretty much can't subsist at the hotel anymore, so they pretty much go on the road with Kenny to try to find the...
Kenny wants them to go to the coast because he says...
I wonder if that's a Cormac reference.
You know what? It probably is now that I'm thinking about it. So Kenny wants to take his family, and they want to go to the coast. Eventually, they come across a train.
They're in Georgia, right?
Yeah, they're in Georgia. That's where I think all of the Walking Dead media is. The comic book, the show, the game, it's all set in Georgia.
Yeah, but they go to Savannah, I think.
That's the ultimate goal, was to get to Savannah, get to the port, and get out on the sea and live like that, because Kenny's a fisherman by trade.
Not to mention, that's where Clementine's parents last were.
Yes, and she wants to find her parents. She thinks they're still alive. So... they get on this train. There's a lot of emotion there. You want to bench it? You want to bring it up later?
Basically, Kenny's kid
gets
bitten, and Kenny has to...
Somebody has to put him down. It's up to player interpretation. I think canonically you would consider it Lee puts him down.
Yeah, I think I made Kenny do it.
And then Mom can't take it. She ends up killing herself too.
Yeah.
So Kenny is a broken man.
Again, I wonder if that's a Cormac reference.
You know what? I didn't realize these. But there is some parallels going on here.
Yeah.
They go down on the train to get to Savannah. Somebody's ringing the bells in the towers. They got to figure out who that is because they're drawing in all the walkers, as they call them.
Kenny, there's a lot of existential angst on a train before that.
Yeah. And they made a drunk, and he kind of accompanies them for a while. And then they get to a house, and at the hotel they met this kid that was with them. He's like a teenager.
He's pretty clueless.
He's extremely clueless. it's up to player interpretation and choices as well about how Lee feels about him. But I think in most people's playthroughs,
I tried to tell him how to change a tire and whatnot, teach him some life lessons.
Yeah. So at the house,
he reminded me a bit of my clueless self.
At the house, more crap goes down. Clementine gets separated from the group by a crazy man. He kidnaps her. So the rest of the Lee and party got to look for her.
So to pause really quick, that crazy man that he's talking about, after the incident with the family, you have to choose whether to raid a car or not.
After the farm.
Right. You have to choose whether to raid Of course, my second playthrough, I chose not to raid the car.
Me too, because I knew ahead of time.
Yeah, the Kenny and gang do it anyway.
Basically, there's a story, and it's not shown on screen, that's told to you later, that him and his family had just came across that road that they were traveling down, and he had panicked and got out of the car to track down his child. I think it was his daughter or somebody. And so there's like this little mini story that's going on.
What happens the second time then if you don't choose to do it? Does he still hold you accountable?
He ultimately sees Lee as a threat to Clementine. He's irrational.
Right. So that's that whole thing we were talking about.
Illusion of choice.
Yeah.
Ultimately, it doesn't matter. He's still going to harbor resentment towards you for one reason or the other.
Right.
Honestly, if you raid the car, it's more of a logical reason, but it's all irrationality.
Right.
You don't really have... Ultimately, no matter what choice you make, it still comes out the same. It's a little bit better in this season than it is in Season 2.
I agree, yeah.
In Season 2, your choices mean absolutely nothing. But in this season, at least your relationships and stuff are directly affected.
So sometimes when you make these choices, some characters might live a little while longer, but it's like the Grim Reaper is still hanging over their head. They're going to die eventually anyway.
So basically, he goes and he saves Clementine, and then he meets a tragic end because he's been trying to save her. He gets bit, and he has to chop off his... You can choose if you chop off his hand or not. I always chopped it off.
It only keeps you alive a little while longer, I think.
Supposedly, illusion of choice. You still end up where you are.
Yeah.
But anyways, he gets to her, and then he tells her to leave him because he's getting ready to die there at the end, and she leaves him, and it's all emotional.
Or you can choose to kill him.
Yeah, I think she can choose to kill him. But yeah, that's the basic summary. We'll, as we discuss other things, we can refer back and make stuff more clear.
Yeah, so I've got several discussion points for our conversation this week. Let's start out before we get into character relationships. We talked about last week with the road, the whole notion of the ecosystem in the road and how it's all gray, ash, and bleak. In The Last of Us, the ecosystem was very lush. It looked like nature hadn't been affected too much by this catastrophe. What do you think's going on with the ecosystem, with this disaster in The Walking Dead? And of course, let's contain our discussion to the game too, just because I haven't watched the TV show much. As far as notions of how's the wilderness doing? How do these characters find food? How do they survive in general? Even how the wilderness looks, how animal wildlife is.
We're going to have a little bit of discussion about design and art design, especially here.
Okay.
You know how when you play certain games, Jeffrey, that they have a brown tone?
Right.
Okay, so this one I would say has a little bit of a gray tone. There's a lot of gray.
It's not overwhelming.
But it's there. It's always present. You could even say symbolically that's a symbol of a dead person because the world itself is coming to a state of calamity and death. But you're starting to see neglect take place in society. Buildings are starting to crumble. Roads are starting to grow up. You said you want to keep it, but it's basically the same in all. You said you want to keep it limited to the game, but it's basically the same across the franchise. It's the same atmosphere. So that's basically how the world looks.
Yeah, so this whole thing takes place at the beginning of this catastrophe, so things haven't gotten too far out of hand.
It's just notable stuff that you'd see changing within the first 3 weeks or something of neglect. And, weeds are starting to grow up, but people are still, there. And you also have to keep in mind that the quarantine in the cities has taken place and factions have started to form. I think it's been a few months since our party actually makes it to Savannah, for example.
Yeah, so most of the people sort of become hunter-gatherers as far as looking for food and rations. Eventually, later in even the game universe, we start seeing farmers and stuff making crops, like the Carver guy in season 2.
Yeah. That's a trope across the franchise. The ultimate goal for most parties is to find a place that's secure and start producing food so that they can settle down and live a semi-civilized life.
Do they ever figure out in the universe what causes the walker? What even caused the walkers to even start? No,
it's theorized that the big reveal at the end will be that information.
I know there's the whole. Have you heard of the whole conspiracy theory about Breaking Bad and The Walking Dead?
Yeah. I'm a little familiar with that,
Yeah.
but that's really unrelated.
Yeah, the meth that Walter White makes is supposedly what causes The Walking Dead.
There's also this theory that I think has a little bit more credence.
Yeah.
That it's a mutated form of gingivitis. So brush your teeth, kids.
Huh.
Yeah.
Damn.
There's also theories that, like, if you're a newborn within the universe, you're actually immune because we've never seen a baby turn. Like, the main children featured have not turned. So if you're born, I think after, there's a theory that you're immune, and ultimately that will be the salvation of civilization. But let's get back to the environment.
Yeah, so on my second playthrough, I was especially paying attention to that. I agree, that sort of brownish color of the wilderness. Of course, it takes place in Georgia, it has almost a southern Gothic feel to it.
Yeah, they don't really have much greenery and stuff unless it's like supposed to be a pleasant scene.
Yeah, and the southern Gothic, elements sort of show up too, even in that whole cannibal episode with the dairy farmers. I think part of what's going on with the environment is very much this whole symbolism of the South is, a wretched place. Almost like the cult.
I don't know if you could go.
The game to me seemed to be a really big critique of Southern culture.
Somewhat, yeah, because there's like little references to Southern culture, especially like there's these little jokes about racism that's implied there. Because we got to explain, Lee is African American,
right?
He's black, and Clementine is also she's a person of color, which is unusual in gaming.
But you got to remember, like even back in the colonial era, the British sent people to Georgia because it was such a harsh environment, harsh landscape. It was a prison colony.
But I mean, you can definitely interpret that like the environment is definitely a critique.
Well, in the Last of Us, there were deer, and other sorts of wildlife. In the Walking Dead game, there doesn't seem to be any wildlife still left, especially considering it's still the start of this catastrophe.
You don't really see much wildlife within the Walking Dead universe because they think the zombies just eat everything. They're so rampant. And I think you do like see dead cats and stuff, don't you? Somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
There's the explanation for that. If you think that The Last of Us is a symbol, like The Last of Us's environment is a symbol of that game, it's almost true because it's a biological disaster. And, it's a fungus.
Mm-hmm.
And fungus, it thrives in greenery. Whereas...
That makes sense.
Yeah, whereas this is like a virus, and it's a human-bred virus, and that kind of thing goes with the trope of abandoned cities. And so, looking at it as a whole, the environment really symbolizes that well in both games. Even in The Road, you could say that the environment is a direct symbol of the hopelessness and despair. And it is. I mean, that's very prevalent.
Especially in that one.
Yeah. I think it's very strong in The Road.
Yeah, maybe it's not as prevalent here as the other two, but it's still there.
Yeah.
I think. Since we're on the subject, why not talk about the South and the Southern Gothic elements a little bit more beyond just the environment? The main reason why I think this is prevalent, not only is Lee an African American character, and he faces a lot of racism throughout the text.
Yeah, and if you go with certain like bits of dialogue, you can kind of like
play that up.
You can play it up if that's your sort of thing, or you can ignore it. They really leave it up to player comfort.
I think the biggest part of that was episode 2 of this, whenever you meet these dairy farmers. The dairy farmers come to your hotel and they're like, hey, we got food if you all will give us gas. Basically, you go to this dairy farm and they play these characters up as exaggerated tropes. I love that they play these up as exaggerated tropes. You have like the sweet old matron of the family.
You boys want some biscuits?
Yeah, I got some cornbread in the oven inside. And some sweet
honey.
tea. And some sweet tea.
Oh, honey, don't worry about that. We'll fix it.
You got her. You got these 2 brothers, and one brother is this extremely chubby man, for the apocalypse. He doesn't seem like it's hurting him.
They're kind of stern,
Right.
and one's a little. It's obvious he's mentally unstable.
They like their guns.
They love their guns.
Yeah.
It's almost a critique on gun culture in America.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. There's a whole trope going back in our popular culture, back to the Texas Chainsaw Massacre in 1974 with the increasing urbanization of America. The whole horror culture has sort of went back and sort of demonstrated the whole fear of the rural, and that's especially happened with the South a lot. Have you ever seen the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre?
Nope.
Oh, it's such a great film. That film plays up. You go into the area too far away from the comforts of the city. Horror culture has played that trope up. Like you go to the very last resort gas station. There's no more gas stations for 50 miles. They always play that up. You're outside of the comforts of civilization, where sort of almost all the liminal, forces exist outside of it that civilization normally couldn't contain. Texas Chainsaw Massacre, it was cannibals. They're having barbecue.
Jeffrey, we talk about cannibals a lot on this podcast.
Yeah. Well, maybe we should go to Dickie's Barbecue tomorrow. Maybe you should sponsor us, Dickie's.
Dickie's Barbecue. It's good.
In the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, it's all a joke on barbecue, and they find these college kids and they eat them. Like there's this whole great scene in the movie where everybody's insane, and it shows the final girl going insane. It's such a wonderful film. We gotta do it sometime. But Walking Dead game, sort of plays on that. They even make jokes to barbecue. So it's definitely a joke to Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
I don't remember that one.
They pretty much, there's a guy who gets shot at the very beginning of the episode on the farm by some bandits. The matron's like, come on in, I'll help patch you up. And then later in the episode, you go.
I like that guy too.
Yeah, he was a bro. Then later on, you go in and you realize they're serving his legs for dinner.
Yeah, Lee comes, and as the player, it's obvious to you as well.
Right.
But Lee comes to the conclusion that everybody else is sitting around the table about ready to dig in. Lee kind of dismisses himself. He wants to go investigate, and he creeps upstairs, and he finds the guy after looking behind a bookcase where a hidden room is.
Yeah.
He finds the guy with his legs chopped off, or is it just one leg?
Both.
It's both legs, and Mama's been in there slicing him up, and he looks like ham slices on the table.
They cut him up while he was alive because they didn't want to tarnish the meat.
Yeah, that trope is there.
Yeah, yeah. The game. There's nothing original about that whole episode. That's the whole point I'm trying to make, But the game is sort of existing in this culture where we constantly sort of stigmatize the rural as a place where bad things happen.
Yeah.
We're both. This is something to talk about on this podcast. Being from Appalachia, there's even this is in Georgia, but even in our state, West Virginia, there's like the Wrong Turn
Redemption
franchise.
Yeah,
constant horror motif, and it definitely happens here. Can you think of any other texts besides Texas Chainsaw Massacre where this kind of thing happens that you're familiar with?
Not off the top of my head.
Yeah,
but it's out there for sure.
Yeah, since the 70s, like I said, Texas Chainsaw 74, right after the horror of Watergate, when America was traumatized by that whole incident.
I just couldn't trust that president again.
Walking Dead games in 2012. So that shows that this whole thing has never really gone away.
Definitely. Looking at current events today, it's still is still prevalent within society.
Of course, maybe rural America really deserves some of this lambasting. That's something we can mention a little bit. Like, everybody's so crazy over their guns, and one of my friends, his father, he pretty much has like a whole militia of guns, armory of guns that could probably fit a militia. Yeah, and he jokes with me that he lives in Raleigh County, but he jokes with me that he's going to hold back all the rednecks from Wyoming County when they come to take his stuff.
Right.
Yeah. So. Yeah. So maybe we deserve some of it. With, I don't know. What do you think about that? Do we deserve some of this, or is it all good fun?
I don't think that we deserve the culture to be mocked in terms of like it being super disparaging.
Right.
I do believe that
because it does cause that stigma, right?
Yeah. And when you cause a stigma, people want to apply it to everyone, and that's not true. However, on that same note, it's there. I mean, you can't deny it.
Right.
West Virginia tends to be a place that ignorance is just accepted. It's not corrected. It's a point of pride for some people.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole gun thing, oh yeah, that's...
Yeah, I don't, just personally, I don't envy anybody for wanting to have guns if that's their hobby or whatever. Some people make it the whole crux of all of their political beliefs, you know what I mean?
Here's the thing. It was once stated by somebody that when a Republican wants a vote, they divide people on issues so that they can push through
their economic policies.
Right. They try to divide, and that's how they get the votes. And I think gun culture in general, even though personally I don't see it as this big issue in our society, is definitely a thing that people
vote on, right?
Yeah, they vote on. I just don't buy into the fact that there's people trying to take your guns. I don't think that's ever been a thing. But yeah, people in West Virginia eat that up. Like, that's a major point of contention for them. So yes, Jeffrey, the stereotype is definitely there. And do we deserve it?
Sometimes, maybe.
On certain things we deserve it. That's one of the things I think we deserve it on.
Yeah, of course, there's some texts that play this. Maybe we should do a month on this too sometime. There's even some texts that play this up. There's a funny movie on Netflix you should check it. Everybody should check out, called Tucker and Dale versus Evil. Basically, the whole plot of that is very similar to The Walking Dead episode 2, similar to Texas Chainsaw. There's these two lovable rednecks. Yeah, they're just happy-go-lucky. These college kids come to town for a camp out, and they think the two rednecks are serial killers, when actually they're just lovable guys. And lots of misunderstandings and shenanigans happen. And yeah,
that sounds pretty good.
Yeah, that whole film plays on this, in a parody sense. Like, the rednecks are actually the smart characters, and the college kids are the ones causing all these misunderstandings. Like, one guy gets stuck in a wood chipper and gets his whole body cut off pretty much, and the redneck's like, why are all these kids committing suicide? Is this a suicide cult or something? Lots of dark humor. So yeah, that text fits in with what we're talking about. So watch that.
Well, yeah. And correction, when I said redemption earlier, I meant deliverance.
Right. Oh yeah, deliverance. So yeah, that's an interesting theme. Of course, in the end, you can choose this episode. Lee can choose whether to kill the guy or leave him there. I chose to kill him.
He dies either way.
Right.
One, if you kill him, you kill him. The other way, he gets ate by zombies. Highly implied.
Of course, that's a nice irony that he gets eaten.
Yep.
So, that's a theme of this text. It's not one of the most prominent themes, but I thought I would bring it up early. The biggest thing we need to talk about, especially in relation with the other two texts we've covered this month, is the relationship between Lee and Clementine. Now, but first, let's talk a little bit about Lee, before we might jump into both of them. The question here is, what makes Lee a compelling character, do you think?
Besides the gameplay portrayal, besides like the fact that he's voiced by an amazing voice actor.
Oh yeah.
I don't remember his name, but it's the guy who does the Hulu.
Yeah, he does
programming.
He does lots of stuff for Telltale.
Besides all of that, like the superficiality of him, Lee is compassionate, extremely compassionate. He's understanding. He is in a state of seeking redemption for himself because he, before the story, like I said, he was in the back of a cop car.
He murdered
someone because they were sleeping with his wife. He walked in on him and killed him.
Passion in the moment, right?
Yeah, I mean that's a stereotypical story, but
right.
that's his. He's seeking redemption for that. He does not consider himself to be a good person.
He's a former professor.
A history, yeah.
Yeah. He taught at a school in Athens, which, my brother and I always joke that, me being a college teacher, teaching at a school in Athens, we have that in common. Yeah.
Yeah, because you're teaching at Concord University in Athens, West Virginia.
And I taught at Ohio University in Athens, Ohio.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, so
when you go to Athens, Georgia, you'll have made them all.
Yeah.
Actually, I think there's like this conspiracy theory that there's an Athens in every state in America, and each one of them is a Masonic city. They have like the Masons. They have a Masons Guild at every one of them.
Yeah.
So.
Ooh. Yeah, but Lee seems like he's a nice, almost everyman sort of figure. Like everybody can sort of impose a little bit of themselves.
That's one of the beauties of Telltale's system. You can make the character kind of your own in a way. I mean, he still follows the same narrative, but maybe he's more peaceful. Maybe he's aggressive. Maybe he's an ass. Maybe he's diplomatic. You can make those decisions.
I think one thing we got to mention a bit about too is a bit about Lee's race. There's been lots of dialogue, especially with games over the past couple of years. We need to incorporate more races besides, like even genders besides.
I think
the
that's
white
definitely
protagonist.
true. And the biggest problem about that is that most guys that make games are white guys like me and you.
Right.
You don't see a lot of minorities in the industry. They're starting to be more prevalent.
Yeah, my brother and I were actually having a conversation about this. We can even think, even the past couple of years, like there's lots of African American women who are starting to show up in games, which is great. Other than Lee, we did a little brainstorming. We couldn't really think of many other African American men who have a strong presence in games.
Not a strong one though.
Yeah,
that I can think of. I'm sure.
Correct us if we're wrong.
Yeah, leave a comment. We'd like to know.
We've played a lot of games, and other than Lee, we couldn't really think of many others.
I mean, you can customizable characters like
in Mass Effect or something.
Like Shepard. He could be black. But, I mean, overall,
Lee was such a road paving figure in that way that I think that we actually an African American character who was didn't have these stereotypes and such.
And Lee is super likable. Like,
yeah,
he's just very likable. He's just trying to do the right thing. He's just really compelling in that way.
Yeah, even more so than the other protagonists we get throughout the series, I think. Like the guy in season 3.
Yeah, definitely.
Definitely wasn't as likable as Lee.
Yeah.
Yeah, so these two have this interesting relation.
Let me elaborate. So, like, the guy in season 3 versus Lee, like, in season 3, it's almost like they were trying too hard to make him do the right thing. Like, his story didn't come extremely natural. It's just like he wants to do this for the sake of family. That's about it. That's like it. He has no other drive. Whereas Lee wants to do it for Clem. That's his family. He wants to do it for the good of the group, which is his extended family. He wants to do it just because he wants to see society restored to what it was. Lee's drive is a lot more deep than just the superficial reason of family.
He sort of dreams of when he can be a college professor type again.
Yeah, that's kind of implied. He just wishes society was what it was, and he wishes that he didn't murder a man.
Yeah.
You can really, you can sympathize with Lee in his narrative.
Of course, he meets this little girl, Clementine. You know, she's almost a blank slate of sorts in this first episode. She doesn't have a whole lot of baggage. You know, of course, her parents were on vacation or something. They left her in the care of a babysitter. You know, so Clementine's always under the assumption that her parents are going to come back.
You see the same innocence in her that you see in the boy.
Right. She's only 8 years old in this, you know, so she has some awareness compared to the other two characters we talked about. She has some awareness.
Well, she's exposed
to the culture.
She's exposed to calamity like right on.
Right. Yeah, but so much of the interaction between Lee and Clementine is it's almost like a parent simulator of sorts.
I never thought about it that way, but that's a really good point. It is.
Yeah, like how do you want to shape her?
There is a very intimate scene on the train where
we teach her how to shoot.
Yeah, and the drunk's like, you got to get that girl some skills. You got to cut that girl's hair. She's going to get grabbed and ate. You got to do this and that. He does not approve of Lee's parenting style regardless. And Lee takes it to heart because it's all true.
Right.
It is true. So he goes and he has this really touching moment with Clementine where he's like, we got to do stuff that you're not going to like. And we're going to cut your hair. We're going to teach you to shoot. And we're going to go over the plan. Like, you got to look at this map and know exactly what we're doing and what we're not doing. You got to learn to control your impulses. And I know that you think that your parents are alive, but, you know, it's not looking too good. Which he's not that frank with her, but it is implied.
Right.
And she even asks him, can we go? And he sort of agrees if we have time.
Yeah, so, like, the relationship between the two and being a parenting simulator. We talked about Lee being a bit of a blank slate, too. Like, maybe that's one reason why we feel such, you know, empathy towards Lee.
I think most people that's played through the game can really start to get a feeling for Lee. He's not superficial, and it runs deep.
Right. Yeah, by the time you get to the end, the game puts you in Clementine's shoes, and you have to choose whether or not Lee dies right there, or whether you leave him to turn into a walker. Heartbreaking moment, you know, to say the least. Yeah, like, I know the first time I played through the game, it was, yeah, I was sort of shell-shocked after that scene.
Should we elaborate on their, like, relationship a little bit more?
Sure, yeah.
You got the dynamic of Lee and how deep he is as a character, but it's the same thing with Clementine. She's also she's a little girl, and she's presented in a video game very, very, very well. Like, she has all the concerns that a little girl has, but she's also getting exposed to this apocalypse firsthand, and she's hardening up, and you can see her becoming a survivor.
Mm-hmm.
Like, throughout each episode, she's becoming a survivor more and more under the guidance of Lee. And it's through that guidance and that relationship that, you know, they become deeper and deeper.
How do you think? I think the comparison between Clementine and Kenny's son, Duck, is interesting here in showing how one matures and one
Duck,
doesn't.
Which is Kenny's son, he is a child. Like, he's portrayed as this hyperactive, wants to talk at the wrong times, is getting in the way of little things, you know, a typical child.
Mm-hmm.
Clementine, on the other hand, Lee is taking great strides to prepare her. Kenny and his wife Katja, they want to shelter Duck. They don't want him to see the horrors firsthand. There's this dynamic of survival that plays through that. How far are you willing to go? Lee, where you could also argue where Lee isn't her biological parent, he's only known her for months. He doesn't have that same type of intimate connection, but at the same time, I would argue that he does, because it takes more effort, I would argue, to teach a child to survive and expose them to the horrors firsthand than it does just letting them sit back and you do everything for them.
Yeah, of course the game plays that up too.
There's like a coming-of-age story embedded in that.
Duck does not reach that moment.
No, Duck gets bit, and as we said earlier, he has to be put down.
By the time we do reach Clementine in season 2, she has learned from Lee what it takes to survive. And
the first episode of season 2 is actually pretty decent for portraying that. The rest of the game, kind of
meh.
That first episode where you start to really see what Clementine has developed into, and it does continue throughout the season. It's a really strong reflection of the first season. I mean, Lee is even mentioned by name up to season 3. That's how strong a character he is.
Right. Yeah,
he's foundational.
There's a flashback to him in season 2, which breaks your heart all over again.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so you mentioned in the first episode we did that this game was sort of your awakening to this sort of
narrative driven. Yeah, it more so than some of the other stuff I've played. It has a very moving story. I mean, I've always got teary-eyed when I'd spend hours with characters on like old JRPGs and stuff. This is like, it's almost like a movie in terms of how much it can move you emotionally. I would say even more so because you get even more connected to these characters than you would through an hour-long presentation.
And so many times in the game, when you're controlling Lee and something bad happens, you have the choice to talk to Clementine. Like I always want one of the dialogue options is, "How are you doing, Clementine?" So it's almost like...
And then she would usually go, "I'm good, Lee," or "Not okay," or whatever. But she's a little girl, but he's constantly checking on her. And that's part of their relationship.
Maybe let's put this relationship in conversation with the other two relationships that we've encountered. So how do you think Lee's relationship with Clementine is similar or different with Ellie and Joel's, or the father and the son?
As far as similarity goes, on the surface, it's most similar to Ellie and Joel. I think that the boy and the father's relationship is more deep than any of them, because that world
it's an actual father and son.
That world, not only that, is a lot more bleak than the other two.
Right.
It's a remote possibility that within the Walking Dead universe and the Last of Us universe, you could actually have settlements and some semblance of civilization. In the road?
No.
It's just too devastated.
There's no hope even to like make agriculture or anything.
So with that considered, the boy and the father just bond a lot stronger than the others. Not to say that the bond between the other two aren't as strong.
Right. It's not a surrogate relationship even, too.
No. So I think comparing the boy and the father as much is kind of incomparable. It's almost a different dynamic between those two. McCarthy does a brilliant job with that relationship. Now with Ellie and Joel, compared to Clem and Lee.
Of course, we have to realize, too, that Clem and Lee were first as far as release dates.
That's true, and that should be considered. As far as comparing them, it's really similar. The main difference is Ellie is older, more crass, and knows the world a lot more firsthand, whereas Clementine does not. Yeah, she learns with Lee. I would say that Ellie is more of like, she's already learned all of her survival stuff for the most part. She's pretty hard edge. Whereas Clem, she has to not observe like Ellie did with Joel. She has to learn from Lee.
Yeah, not to mention, unlike Ellie, who before the narrative had gone through some traumas,
Clementine is fresh off. Yeah, she's been in her treehouse hiding from zombies.
Yeah, she's trying to process, like, what about my real parents? Then she has to process Lee's death. She has to process Duck's death. Everybody who dies in the Clementine has some interaction with, so it's all about, you see these traumas happening to a young person for the first time, so that's...
And there is that parallel of Ellie. I mean,
right.
Ellie went through the same thing. The boy... No, I mean, he lost his mom.
Yeah,
but...
of course, the whole conversation with The Last of Us was about the trauma of Ellie killing, David.
Mm-hmm. Clementine's more trauma comes at the very end.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, even, like I said, even though Ellie goes through traumas, she had gone through some, even before that game. And whereas Clementine's encountering her first traumas. That's the point I'm trying to make here, which makes it interesting.
Yeah, it does. Like I said, Ellie is more of an observer, and Clementine's more of a direct student.
So maybe even thinking about these three texts, in conversation with each other, what do you think these texts have to offer, our larger culture? How do you think these texts might influence future texts, sort of like it?
Okay, let's touch upon gaming in general first.
So gaming before film? Or?
Yeah, let's focus on the contrast between a novel, a film, and games.
Okay.
Games take active participation more so than any other thing, right? And I would argue that this could lead to a more intimate experience, which is what this podcast is trying to set up to demonstrate. With that in mind, it's already shown that it's influential. You could say that The Last of Us was somewhat inspired by The Walking Dead.
Yeah, I'm sure that Druckmann and that gang were probably writing that game about the same time Telltale was writing.
So overall, I think if you're looking at them all, like within members within the genre, they definitely bring stories of hope, of struggle, of survival, and they do it well.
Right.
I mean, I wouldn't argue that any of them do not do what they try to accomplish. As a whole, are they going to be influential? I would say absolutely. McCarthy is already influential. I mean,
right, as we talked about.
Yeah.
His body of work. I do wonder, though, if we're going to have a lot more texts in a post-apocalyptic setting.
Do you think that maybe it's starting to go out of style and it's overdone?
Well, ever since The Last of Us, I can't think of... The Last of Us was 2013. I can't think of any games like that since then.
The whole zombie thing didn't really come out until the TV show got to be like super popular. I mean, you had it. You had like Resident Evil. You had the theme throughout gaming.
Horizon Zero Dawn, which is a new game that came out this year. It plays on that a little bit, but it mostly features the main character after that relationship has already been culminated.
It's always been there, prevalent within like the survival genre of gaming. Do I believe it's still going to be influential in the future? Yes, I believe it already has. I mean, that's really all I got to say about that.
Yeah, as far as if we ever do another month on post-apocalyptic narratives, it'll be a different take beyond the two relationships.
Yeah. Yeah,
so one other theme I want to mention, in The Walking Dead is gender. We had a conversation, about Lily, who's one of the main characters that we encounter in addition to Kenny. And, of course, Lily has a very angry father.
Lily, you're introduced in first episode. She, you meet her at Lee's old... Okay, I didn't mention the summary that Lee went back to the pharmacy that his parents used to own. Lee wanted to travel through to see if there were survivors. Is that right? Why did Lee get there? I can't remember.
The pharmacy?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it was because his family ran the pharmacy.
And he was wanting to check on them?
Right.
Is that what it was? Okay. So Lee gets to the pharmacy. There's zombies on the street. He gets ran into the pharmacy with Clementine in tow. And Kenny and his family. So they get in the pharmacy, they're boarded up, and they meet Lily and her dad. And her dad is an extremely unlikable character.
Right.
Telltale does a good job at making this guy a total asshat that you will never like in 100 years. He really plays the angry, stereotypical old conservative man.
Right.
The kind that would scream at you to get off his lawn, etc.
Clint Eastwood from Gran Torino.
Yeah, basically. That's the kind of character that he is.
Yeah, so the point I was going to make about Lily was, like, so many of her choices were, like, you pretty much have a choice. Should I side with Kenny or should I side with Lily, when it comes to, like, their debates about how to run the homestead and whatnot. Lily, at the very beginning of episode 2, she, you start harping at her. Why are you being a bitch, pretty much? And she's just like, here, I want to give this food to you. You choose who eats. She's got this ex-military background, so that automatically makes her like a leader. I guess the point I'm trying to make about Lily was, You know, like, I think so many people, I tried to be, the first time I played it, I kind of disliked her. You know, I tried to, my second playthrough, I tried to be a little bit more sympathetic to her.
Yeah, you can sympathize with her because she has to make the hard decisions. They
Yeah.
try to play that up because she's like, Lee, you give out the food then.
Yeah, I wonder if, like, a lot of the reasons why so many people dislike her is because of this, like, systematic misogyny, you know, about these sort of characters, you know, or is it just because she does come across, you know, the wrong way, perhaps?
A little bit of both, I would argue.
Yeah.
She is definitely very sympathetic with her father, and he is irrationally hateful.
Right. Of course, that's a very human thing to do, right?
Yeah. You can tell that he really hates Lee.
Well, he hates Lee because I mean, we can maybe argue that her father was a racist figure, but he does know that Lee was a former murderer.
Yeah,
you know,
he knows.
So he's just being protective in a sense, too.
He's still an asshat.
Yeah.
As far as Lily goes, you can be sympathetic with her. And most people probably do not like her.
I was not sympathetic. I was not sympathetic with her in my first playthrough at all.
I think I was sympathetic with her in both times because it does take a lot out of people to try to be a leader.
Right.
And they kind of just nominate her for the job because she has military training or whatever. It's not very fair. But her ideas, they don't always make sense.
Right.
And that's a lot of contention, especially for her and Kenny, and that's why they feud.
She's like, let's stay at the hotel, let's be safe. And Kenny's like, let's go out to the coast. And she's like, why are you doing that? That's kind of stupid.
But playing on the part about misogyny, it's there. It's like even there because Kenny almost looks down at her because she's a woman.
Right, yeah.
He does the same thing with his wife to an extent. Kenny believes that men are providers. He's traditional.
He's the main voice of the household.
Yeah, he's I mean, the stereotypical redneck, and he believes that men are providers, men get things done.
Even though his wife's a veterinarian and he does jack shit.
And he's a fisherman.
Right.
I mean, that's a pretty hard job, Jeffrey.
Mm-hmm.
So he's away from his family a lot, which is mentioned later when he's talking to Lee about his bond with Duck, that he's not always around. But him and Katja, he definitely sees himself as the provider, as the person who has to get things done, get their hands dirty, etc., etc. Even though Katja's back here trying to stitch up bodies and everything else.
So you think the game is aware then of, like, maybe it is painting Lily in this complex enough way where some people might read it that simply and some people might?
I think the writers definitely know.
Yeah.
Because it's too intentional not to.
It's unlike McCarthy where there's just a dislike of women all around.
And the writers do write good women. They wrote Clem very well.
Right. Yeah, I just found that character extremely interesting on the second playthrough, especially compared to the first. Like,
her whole dynamic and the situation that she is in is very interesting, and you can analyze that fairly deeply.
It would make it for a good paper if somebody wanted to write about it, I think.
You aspiring literary kids out there, you feel free to steal that idea. First one that does it gets it.
Yeah, take it to a conference.
Just don't tell them where it came from.
Yeah, so,
I mean, you got to do all the footwork, so...
Yeah, we're just musing here. Yes.
My muse, the Appalachian gaming professors. All we ask for is a credit.
All we ask for is a review on iTunes.
Okay, that's fair. We need those.
Yeah. So, final thoughts on Walking Dead or even post-apocalyptic narratives in general before we close out?
Well, the game, I can recommend it to anybody. It's just one of those games, I think anybody sits down and plays it, if they're not being overly critical and approaching it for what it is, they'll like it.
Yeah, don't approach it like it's The Road.
Don't approach it like it's Call of Duty either.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not as deep on themes as The Road is.
Also one thing to mention too, it's almost like a choose your own adventure book you would read as a kid. It's not necessarily a game where there's a ton of gameplay.
That's true. It's more akin to what you would call a walking simulator.
Point and click.
The point and click elements are very, very minimal compared to a traditional point and click. One of the things that I struggled with when I first played that game, because it's by Telltale and I was expecting a point and click.
Yeah, it's an 8 or 9 hour long movie. That's pretty much what.
Yeah, it's like he said. It's more of like a story where you make your own choices. Ultimately, those choices don't matter. It's all your own choice, but you know.
Yeah, that's one thing to mention too. There are lots of games like this coming out now where there isn't an illusion of choice, where your choices actually are impactful. Did you ever play Heavy Rain?
Yes.
Yeah, Heavy Rain, I think, is a game where your choices do mean something.
Yeah, they matter.
Until Dawn is a really great, like, 80s horror simulator almost. Like, it gives you like these stereotypical characters. Whatever choices you make can lead to their deaths. Yeah, so there are games where there isn't that illusion of choice.
But final thought on The Walking Dead. It provides a very dynamic relationship. It's a very worthwhile relationship to explore and see firsthand. It's a beautiful game, Jeffrey.
Yeah, one thing to mention too, if you're not a very hardcore gamer, let's say you're on the side of more of the literary part of this podcast, even if, like, let's say you don't have a game PC or an Xbox or a PlayStation. I hate to encourage mobile gaming, but you can actually even get this game on your phone.
It's been imported to a lot of systems, a lot of platforms, because it's so successful and a good narrative, and it's accessible. It's not hard to play.
Anybody can get it. It's very cheap.
So if this is like somewhere that you would start learning about like narrative driven games, I suggest you start with this one.
You don't have to be familiar with the rest of The Walking Dead to play it.
It's all there for you.
Yeah, Justin watches the show and I don't. So
but yeah, it's all there. They did a good job. All right, I think that about wraps it up with our analysis of The Walking Dead.
So shall we introduce our next month's theme?
Let's talk about post-apocalyptia as a whole more, without really referencing like The Walking Dead or any of the things that we've focused on. Would you say that it's culturally relevant in the grander scheme?
Well, sure. Like we talked about before, like putting you in this setting, is a way to put a mirror even on our own society and the problems we're encountering, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just removing you from everyday life. And
I think there's a part of every person that can theorize, what would I do if the world came to an end?
Mm-hmm.
How would I survive? And I think it's an important question. I think it lets people realize what their strengths are in life.
Yeah, I mean,
and play upon them.
It's something that a lot of people spend a lot of time thinking about.
That's true. So overall, I feel like this has been a pretty good month as far as like analysis and cultural exploration. But it's over now, so it's time to start talking about the future. Well, we really hope you guys enjoyed that theme.
So next month, our theme, not only do I have an interest in literature, but my interests also extend to history as well.
Yeah, mine too.
I have an undergraduate degree in history. Next month, considering a lot of the events that are happening in America right now, all the conversations with regarding the Confederate statues and such.
You know what that poses, Jeffrey? Poses the question, what if things were different?
What if things were different?
What if things didn't happen that way?
Next month, we're going to be surveying several different texts, which play with history, which take an alternative way of looking at history. What if Alternative History Month?
So we'll be covering in September.
In September, our first text will be another game. It'll be Wolfenstein: The New Order from Bethesda.
That's on the 2nd. Well, our recording date's on the 2nd. It'd actually be released on the 4th.
The text that we're going to be doing after that is Philip K. Dick's novel, The Man in the High Castle.
That'll be on the 9th recording, and it will be released on the 11th.
Most of you probably know that title from the Amazon miniseries. We're doing the novel instead. for different reasons. We'll talk about that later.
Canonically, I mean, novels are usually better representations of their themes.
Yeah, of course, both of these are what ifs. What if World War II turned out differently? Third text will be Inglourious Bastards from Quentin Tarantino. Yeah, that should be one most of you are familiar with.
The recording date on that will be the 16th. It will be released on the 18th.
And our last text will be from the Assassin's Creed series. I spent a lot of time meditating on which Assassin's Creed game to do, since they all are alternative histories of sorts. But I thought we would do the most recent one, Assassin's Creed Syndicate, which, it'll be a nice turn away from World War II and the fascists. It takes place in Victorian England, so that'll let us look at the Victorian era a bit.
And we will record that one on the 23rd. It will be released on the 25th.
Yeah, and of course, we've already spoiled what's coming ahead in October, too.
But we're not going to talk about the actual titles in it yet,
right.
Jeffrey.
Yeah, but you can expect
something spooky and crawly and creepy for October.
You can expect some supernatural horror.
Yeah.
Right, so.
And hint.
Metaphysical horror.
And here's a hint. The primary author that we're focusing on is controversial with his views on race.
Right. That is what lies ahead.
Yeah, I think that'll be a pretty fun month.
Yeah,
it definitely is in our wheelhouse.
I still wish we could have squeezed something in about the Confederates in there, since that's so hot button right now.
Yeah, that would have been good.
Maybe we'll do a second month on it.
Well, we'll see.
Yeah, with fascists are pretty in demand right now, too. Conversation about fascists.
So I think that's about everything. We're going to go ahead and get this wrapped up. And we got the Twitter coming up next week.
Yeah, so let me update you on that. We're working on getting together a Twitter page now. Our Twitter handle will be at app gaming profs, PROFS, app gaming profs.
Jeffrey will probably post a lot of his daily lamentations on there and status updates for the podcast. I'll occasionally try to get something posted that I'm thinking about, whatever.
Yeah, so we will update on things on Twitter, so look out for us there. Give us a follow, retweet us, spread the news about our podcast.
Yeah, tell your friends. I don't know how appealing we would be, but I mean, each person should decide something on their own. And then if you like it, you can subscribe,
like,
review.
Give us a review.
We definitely need ratings and reviews. That will help us out long term if we get more reviews and more listeners. I mean, even as far as like expanding our support, which we're going to be working on a support network later. It's not really a priority right now. We want to get us a solid listener base. But later, as we get more support, we'll be able to do things like bring more guests on. They can kind of help talk about this stuff, where it's just not you listening to us two go on incoherently for an hour and a half. You can listen to somebody else join in.
We will bring some clowns in, do a song and dance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then maybe once we start getting even more people, we'll start live streaming. I mean, we've been talking about it.
Me and you and Franny the cat.
Yeah, we'll get a microphone for Franny.
She's been trying to give us her thoughts during this podcast.
All right, Jeffrey. Well, you know how we always end it now.
Yeah, so we are going to end on a poem. Decided I would do something and had a little bit to do with love, a little bit to do with despair.
Because, that's these relationships we've covered this month. They're all about the love. They're all about hope and survival.
So I'm doing the poem, The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock by T.S. Eliot. Let us go then, you and I, when the evening is spread out against the sky, like a patient etherized upon a table. Let us go through certain half-deserted streets, the muttering retreats of restless nights and one-night cheap hotels, and sawdust restaurants with oyster shells. Streets that follow like a tedious argument of insidious intent to lead you to an overwhelming question. Oh, do not ask, what is it? Let us go and make our visit. In the room the women come and go, talking of Michelangelo. The yellow fog that rubs its back upon the window panes, the yellow smoke that rubs its muzzle on the window panes, licked its tongue into the corners of the evening, lingered upon the pools that stand in drains, let fall upon its back the soot that falls from chimneys, slipped by the terrace, made a sudden leap, and seeing that it was a soft October night, curled once about the house and fell asleep. And indeed there will be time for the yellow smoke that slides along the street, rubbing its back upon the window panes. There will be time to prepare a face to meet the faces that you meet. There will be time to murder and create, and time for all the works and days of hands that lift and drop a question on your plate. Time for you and time for me, and time yet for 100 indecisions, and for 100 visions and revisions before the taking of a toast and tea. In the room, the women come and go, talking of Michelangelo. And indeed there will be time to wonder, do I dare, and do I dare? Time to turn back and descend the stair with the bald spot in the middle of my hair. They will say, how his hair is growing thin. My morning coat, my collar mounting firmly to the chin, my necktie rich and modest, but asserted by a simple pin. They will say, but how his arms and legs are thin. Do I dare disturb the universe? In a minute there is time for decisions and revisions which a minute will reverse. For I have known them all already, known them all, have known the evenings, mornings, afternoons. I have measured out my life with coffee spoons. I know the voices dying with a dying fall beneath the music from a farther room, so how should I presume? And I have known the eyes already, known them all, the eyes that fix you in a formulated phrase. When I am formulated sprawling on a pen, when I am pinned and wriggling on the wall, then how should I begin to spit out the butt heads of my days and ways? And how should I presume? And I have known the arms already, known them all, arms that are braceleted and white and bare, but in the lamplight down with light brown hair. Is it perfume from a dress that makes me so digress? Arms that lie along the table, or wrap about a shawl? And how should I then presume, and how should I begin? Shall I say I have gone at dusk through narrow streets and watched the smoke that rises from the pipes of lonely men in shirt sleeves leaning out of windows? I should have been a pair of ragged claws scuttling across the floors of silent seas. In the afternoon, the evening sleeps so peacefully, smoothed by long fingers, asleep, tired, or it malingers, stretched on the floor here beside you and me. Should I, after tea and cakes and ices, have the strength to force the moment to its crisis? But though I have wept and fasted, wept and prayed, though I have seen my head grown slightly bald, brought in upon a platter, I am no prophet, and here's no great matter. I have seen the moment of my greatness flicker, and I have seen the eternal footman hold my coat and snicker, and in short, I was afraid. And would it have been worth it after all, after the cups, the marmalade, the tea, among the porcelain, among some talk of you and me? Would it have been worthwhile to have bitten off the matter with a smile, to have squeezed the universe into a ball, to roll it toward some overwhelming question, to say, I am Lazarus, come from the dead, come back to tell you all, I shall tell you all? If one settling a pillow by her head should say, this is not what I meant at all, this is not it at all. And would it have been worth it after all? Would it have been worth a while after the sunsets in the dooryards and the sprinkled streets, after the novels, after the teacups, after the skirts that trail along the floor, and this and so much more? Is it impossible to say just what I mean? But as if a magic lantern threw the nerves and patterns on a screen, would it have been worthwhile if one settling a pillow or throwing off a shawl and turning toward the window should say, this is not it at all, this is not what I meant at all? No, I am not Prince Hamlet, nor was meant to be. Am an attendant lord, one that will do to swell a progress, start a scene or two, advise the prince, no doubt, an easy tool, deferential, glad to be of use, politic, cautious, and meticulous, full of high sentence, but a bit obtuse, at times indeed almost ridiculous, almost at times the fool. I grow old, I shall wear the bottoms of my trousers rolled. Shall I part my hair behind? Do I dare to eat a peach? I shall wear white flannel trousers and walk upon the beach. I have heard the mermaids singing, each to each. I do not think that they will sing to me. I have seen them riding seaward on the waves, calming the white hair of the waves blown back. When the wind blows the water white and black, we have lingered in the chambers of the sea, by sea girls wreathed with seawood red and brown, till human voices wake us, and we drown.